Can you tell me when you began to get interested in your family history and genealogy, and why?
It started in 5th grade when we had a school project, and I was visiting with a grandmother who was also interested, and we built the first family tree then. And then I continued to do work on it off and on at the local library when I was a kid, and then as a young adult I started working at the Census Immigration Office that was in Chicago, and then I started using some of the online material like Ancestry.com, and then sort of the biggest commitment I ever made to the project was 3 years ago when I flew over to Germany. As I had done work here and sort of looked through family documents or whatever I picked up from census material or other genealogical sources, I certainly had a list of all of the towns where I believed my ancestors had come from, and I kept that list, and I've also got an interest in geography, and so I sort of would have had maps or atlases, and I would have looked on the map to see where those towns were, just out of curiosity. But if you look at a map long enough, or if I look at a map long enough, I guess I decided I wanted to go and actually see those places, and it was just to see the towns. As I said before, when I left, I didn't have any expectation of finding people. I was just going to visit the towns where I knew my ancestors had come from. I knew I had ancestors from two parts of Germany, or what had been Germany, and so I had two broad targets where I was visiting, and there were 2 towns in Bavaria and about 4 towns that are now in Poland that used to be in Prussia or the eastern part of Germany. And I first went to Bavaria, and I flew to Munich and drove over to stay in these little towns for a day or two and just sort of wander around. The first town where the Ellwanger's wing of the family was from is a little bit closer to Stuttgart, and I did some research at a genealogical library that was there, and found a few ancestors and was feeling very good about myself and thought that now the whole trip had been worthwhile because I had added some names to the family tree, and then drove over to the second town, which was Alerheim, and in Alerheim I sort of went to a church and looked for a library and stumbled across a brewery that had the family name Scheible on it. So I walked into the brewery and asked the employee if there were any Scheibles still around, and was quickly introduced to Mr. Scheible, who was 83 at the time. And after a short conversation with him, it became very evident that we were indeed related to each other, and it was the same Scheible family. Sure. Well, after it was clear we had a couple of names that were definitely in common, and that sort of my double great-grandfather, or I guess it would have been, was the same immigrant that he knew of to be his great-uncle that had left. He said he thought he probably had something for me that he wanted to show me, and at this point I'd only been talking to him for 5 or 10 minutes, and so I wouldn't have known that he was also an active genealogist. He went upstairs to his office and brought down a picture of my great-grandmother, which was identical to a picture that I had, and it turns out that was her wedding picture, and that the double great-grandfather was a proud father of the bride and had distributed pictures both to all of the American cousins, but it also had mailed pictures back to Germany, where he had come from, and this was the same photo. And so even though I imagined that I must have had the only copy of that picture in the world, it was quite amazing to all of a sudden see exactly the same picture halfway across the world in somebody else's study. I had gotten it from my grandfather, and
Your
sort of so as the family genealogist, lots of those pictures have sort of passed to me because all of the sort of cousins and aunts and uncles who are not going to otherwise take care of those pictures, or who like them but don't feel attached to them, sort of end up giving them to me, and I'm trying to catalog them a little bit.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of the emotional charge of it? Like, what were the most emotional or moving moments?
I got sort of caught off guard or surprised, and I still tend to get choked up sometimes when I talk about this, but after the first stop in Gross Epoch, where, driving around, I might see, like, the Ellwanger Vineyard or something, and this was the other name I was looking for, and it was a small town, and I would have guessed, well, there just can't be that many of them. I quickly discovered that, no, actually 10% of the town has the same last name, and that if you check immigration records in a 20-year period, there were 20 separate Ellwanger families that immigrated to the United States. So just because you've got the same last name you're looking for doesn't really mean you're about to find your cousins. And so I'd sort of been let down a little bit on the first stop. So as I came into Alerheim, I sort of had set myself up with that same expectation, that just because you see somebody with a common name, that doesn't really mean they're going to be related to you. But as this guy sort of was looking at my notes, and it became clear that it really was the same, and that the names he was looking at he was very familiar with, and he had small changes for marriage dates or birth dates or certain locations, it was finding long-lost cousins, and it was just an awesome, great feeling that here is somebody in the family. So I had very fun phone calls back to the U.S., sort of explaining to my wife or my folks, hey, I found cousins. We ought to go find some way to get back over here and have everybody say hi. And so it's taken a couple of years here just because of, busy schedules and planning, but we're looking forward to next June when hopefully we'll have 10 or 12 aunts, uncles, and cousins from 2 or 3 generations that all make the trip back over. Yeah, that part you just mentioned, though, that it was not just an easy find, that I've been working on it for so long, and then to get the huge hit sort of makes all the other work seem really worthwhile.